continue looking at the CRUD operations. We know that that stands for create, retrieve, update, and delete. And we used a select statement to do retrieve, and we used an insert statement to do the update. So what comes next is create. If you remember, we're doing them in a slightly different order. Create means create a new record, insert a new piece of data, and we know that obviously we're using a relational database here. So that would mean inserting a row into the table. Now the way that we do that is in SQL we use an insert statement, and it looks like this. So we've got insert into table, and then in brackets we have the attributes, the column headings, and then we have the word values, and then in brackets we actually have a list of the actual bits of data that we're going to insert into the table. Now on our particular implementation of CRUD, we've got these 4 pathways. Each of these pathways represents one of the different CRUD operations. So we've done retrieve and delete. Let's have a look at create. And in this design, what we'll have is emp main, and that's our main page, and that's got a link. And when you click on that link, that's going to carry you through to these 2 pages. And this is going to be very similar to a pattern that we've seen before. There's going to be a form, and then there's going to be a page that deals with the consequence of when bits of data are typed into that form. So it's a form and a response page. And you can see the names of the pages I'm using here. I've got empinsert.php and empinsert.response.php. So what's that actually going to entail? We'll have a form, and that's going to be exactly the same as the forms that we've seen before. So we're going to have a bunch of input fields, and those are going to correspond to the columns in our emp table. So you'll type a new person in, and then you'll click on OK. And what will happen is you'll then go to emp insert response. This is our response page, and what it will do is it will simply insert a row into the table, whatever the values were that you typed into the form. So let's look at those in more detail then. Here's emp insert, and there's nothing particularly new in here. It's all HTML. There's no actual PHP. The important bit is perhaps the bit at the top where we've got the name of the response page, emp insert response, and we've got the method that we're actually using, which in this instance is going to be post. Now if we just work our way down the form, you can see the different types of input fields that we've got. We've got emp number, which is a text, ename, which is a text. That's those 2 there. Then I thought I'd do something a little bit more elegant here. We've got a little drop-down box for the job, because we know that job has a limited number of values. It can be admin, analyst, manager, president, or sales. And then next up, we've got a whole bunch of input fields: manager number, hire date, salary, commission, department number. And obviously there's a button there. And when you click on the button, we'll travel through to emp insert response. So let's have a look at emp insert response. And what we're going to do is we're basically going to do this in 2 parts. So first thing we do, just like we did whenever we've had a form and a response page, is we retrieve values from the form. And then we'll create a connection to the database. We'll use that database library. So that's the first part. So let's actually have a look at what that looks like. Well, if we want to retrieve the values from the form, we know we're using post. It's going to look like this. So we've got a whole bunch of lines that basically go $_ post in capital letters, and then the name of the value from the form. And of course, if you remember, I've suggested that we use the same name. We use the same name on the form. We use the same name in post. Well, we have to do that anyway. And then we're going to use the same name for the variable that we create, just because it's just easier. You're less likely to make mistakes if you do something like that. Then we create a connection variable and import the database library, and that looks like this. And remember, you have to change those values depending upon whether you're using MAMP on a PC, MAMP on a Mac, or the university MAMP, the university MySQL server. So that's part one. So we've got our values from the form, we've created a connection to the database server, and we've got all our variables all lined up. Next up, we have to do this. We need to create our SQL string. So in other words, we're going to have to create that insert statement, and then we're going to send it off to the database and actually get the results back. So what does that actually look like? Well, we know that the SQL here is going to be that insert statement. So let's have a look at it. Now at the top of this page, I've got an example so that you can see the syntax for the SQL statement, just in case you've gotten it from the first year. To insert a record, we're going to use insert into, and then we have the name of the table, and then we have values, and then we have a whole bunch of values in brackets, something like that. Now I'm using the sort of slightly shorter form of insert here. This works fine. Insert into emp values, and if you scan down you can see all the particular values that we have. Emp number, ename, job, manager number, hire date, sal, com, and department number. And we're actually creating a string, and what will happen here is that the values for emp number, ename, job, manager number, etc. will all be inserted into the string at the appropriate point to create that SQL. Now there's one thing to watch out for here, which is if you go back to the SQL statement at the top of the page, if something is a string, like for example, if you look at the student values part, you can see that the K number, that's obviously a string, and the name is a string, Watson. So strings have to be wrapped up in quotes. Numbers we can just express literally. We can just put the number or we can put the variable name. But for things that are actually going to be strings, this is a little bit tricky. When we insert it into the SQL string, what we have to do is we have to wrap them up in quotes. So let's just travel down that SQL statement. Insert into emp values. Now this is the important bit here. Emp number is not a string because it's just a number. So I can just go $emp number and I can use a comma. But the next field, ename, now that is a string. So if you look closely, you can see how I've wrapped up $ename in quotes. Job is a string, so I've wrapped up in quotes. Manager number is just a number, so I don't need any quotes on that one. Hire date, well in this instance we're just going to pretend it's a string, so I've wrapped it up in quotes. Sal, com, and department number are all simply numbers, so there are no quotes required there. And that's important, and in fact this tends to be the tricky bit, getting that SQL string correct, making sure you've got quotes in the right place. So all we're doing here, by the way, remember, is we're actually constructing the SQL string. We haven't actually sent it off to the database or anything like that. So the next step is to send it off to the database server, and we've got a simple line that does that. We go use database SQL, just like that. And then we can have a sort of simple message that basically says one row inserted or the new person has been inserted, something like that. And that can just be a simple print statement. So that's the first three bits of functionality for this done. The next bit is, to an extent, the hardest bit, because as you can see, when we have to update some information, it's actually going to require 3 pages, and that's what we'll cover in the next activity next time.